Welcome to the Youth Work Plus podcast. I'm Becky.
I'm Olly.
And this is episode 9. Can you believe it?
No,
I forgot. I know. You'll notice that we're back on Zoom, and partly because of Omicron, partly because Olly and I live quite far away from each other, and this time Zoom worked out better. And today, Olly, what are we talking about? Unpack the theme a little bit.
So with a new year coming in, we thought it'd be helpful to look at what do we actually mean by success. What is success in youth work? Sometimes it can be a bit of a sea with loads of external expectations and a slightly kind of vague sense of failure. So it would be good to, we thought at the start of the year to look at, well, all right, new year, what are we actually trying to do? What does success mean in youth and children's ministry in the church?
Yeah, and I think like part of our reason for wanting to cover this topic is obviously it's been a really tough couple of years, and most of us probably feel like we haven't come anywhere close to success in our youth or kids ministry. We've struggled on, and perhaps we haven't seen the successes that we hoped for, or we've measured it in a way that perhaps isn't helpful or useful, and so we felt that it's not been very successful. We want to unpack a little bit today, don't we, about like how we measure success and perhaps which are useful ways and which are not so useful ways.
And I think it does provide us an opportunity as well. All our old measures of success, which may or may not have been useful, have sort of taken a bit of a pasting over the last couple of years, and so it gives a good opportunity to reflect on what are we actually trying to do.
Yeah, it should do. So most people measure success by numbers of people, numbers of activities or programs, or by how busy we are.
Yeah, and I'd qualify that too. I think people, even those of us who think we don't measure our success by numbers and number of programs and how popular the things that we do are, I think all of us do. And I was made aware of that. Like, I've never cared about numbers, but when I talk to other people, sometimes the temptation to slip in the numbers of people coming, obviously if it went well, can overwhelm. And that's a weird thing, I think.
Yeah, and I think like numbers are, I'm not saying that, I don't think numbers are totally not useful, because they can be. Like, if no one's coming to your stuff, then you need to kind of mix things and change things up a little bit. But I think when we only measure stuff by numbers or how busy we are or the number of activities and programs, then actually sometimes I think we get bogged down in that stuff and we're focusing too much on the wrong thing. When one of the more important things to do is to be allowing space for God to do transformation in the kids and youth work ministries that we are a part of. And if we're too focused on numbers, sometimes we're not enough focused on that, which is the main thing that we're hopefully there for. We want God to transform young people's lives. And so we should be putting as much focus on that as we are on how many people are coming and whether people are engaging in that or not.
And numbers will lie to you a bit, I think, as well. If you're trying to use that as a success for measurement, like, I think at the moment, the COVID, I think, showed that actually the number of people coming doesn't necessarily equate to the number of people engaging. And I think a lot of us have found that the people who we thought were core and the people who we thought were like, oh yeah, they're really engaging, maybe they weren't so much. It's just that they were turning up. And when they didn't have to turn up because COVID and stuff, then they stopped coming. And also I think numbers lie a bit because it's totally relative to where you are and what your context is. If you're out in a more rural context with not very many young people and not very many facilities and not much of a budget, the statistics back up you'll have smaller youth work, and all of the biggest youth works around the country are in wealthy large cities. It's just common sense. Like, if you've got loads of people around and you've got big resources to run fun things, you'll get more people. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's successful or not successful.
Yeah.
It's just a
Well,
product.
yeah, and at the end of the day, more bums on seats doesn't necessarily mean more people transformed. And
No.
so we kind of need to be looking at, investing in what we have, who we have, and fostering that kind of environment that invites and welcomes new people, but also builds lasting, deep community that's providing opportunities for young people to encounter God for themselves, to be transformed by God for themselves. And I guess that's a better measurement, isn't it? Like, how many people have we seen anybody transformed? how many people have we seen transformed? Or are we providing, how many opportunities have we provided for young people or children to meet with God? And those are kind of measurements, I guess, that are perhaps a bit better to use than how many people have come.
Yeah, and it's important going in knowing what we're trying for. So if one of your aims is to reach out to people who aren't churched, for example, that's a useful aim, because you know the people who are churched and the people who aren't churched. That's a good way to measure. And so if all of your, so for example, I was running a Friday night youth group, and it was planned to be an outreach activity, more of a bridge building, so that people could experience the church community in a non kind of threatening way. And this was pre-COVID, and I started to notice that the only people coming were people with Christian parents, which that's fine, but that wasn't the aim of the group. And so then you start to question whether or not it's being successful. It was fun, people were coming, we were having a nice time. And actually I was challenged by that and thought, oh, maybe we should stop it. And then as I came to the point to talk to the young people about that, to say, is this group successful maybe? And gently kind of say, what ways can we help you to bring friends who aren't Christian? And I looked around, and like 5 people there weren't like from Christian homes. And then on that evening, when I'd kind of shared that thing, a young person came up to me and said she was a bit like clearly upset, and I was like, oh no, I said the wrong thing. And she came up to me and was like, actually, I've been thinking about becoming a Christian. I'd like to know how you do that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's success for me. Like, that was amazing. But it's about knowing what you're aiming for, I think. Otherwise it can become really oppressive, and maybe this is just me, but I think we get lots of expectations put on us when we work for a church from lots of different people, whatever their particular hobby horse is at the time. And I think we need to do the work of bedding in with God and being like, God, what have you put me and my team here to do? And how can we do that, and do that well, the best we can?
Yeah, and I think as well, like, sometimes we're a bit too hard on ourselves. So like, we think we haven't done a good job because we haven't seen, amazing miracles happen, or
Speak for yourself. I see that in my youth work every week.
Or we've got, we really want to see the work grow and it just hasn't been, or the opposite has happened and there's been decline because of COVID. And I think sometimes we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves that, like, we haven't done a good job, when actually some of those outcomes are like nothing to do with us. Like, none of us caused the pandemic, or like lots of people obviously have seen a decline in their numbers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing a worse job now than they were before. It's just that, like, the trend are that people are just more inconsistent with church attendance and stuff, and that's seen across the board. But I think the important thing to remember, and the thing I always try and remind myself of, is like, to focus on the little small wins, like you said, like when young people say a little thing to you that you think, wow, like, they've really changed their opinion on that, or they've really grown in the last year, or a parent comes and says thank you for providing something, or for having an impact on their young person. Like, those are the little small wins that I think we need to cling on to sometimes, because we don't always get like an overwhelming sense that we're doing a good job or that things have gone well, especially with the last 2 years of stuff happening and with the pandemic. and like we have to cling on to those small wins to as fuel to keep going sometimes.
And I think it's important to hold on to the bigger picture in terms of, and looking backwards can be really helpful for that. Obviously, week in, week out, we can feel discouraged, particularly if like sessions go badly, or just something can come along and rock us. But I've mentioned it in other podcasts, but some of the proudest moments of me are when I look back on young people's lives, young people who are older now, and I see the cool and brilliant lives that they're leading. Not, our youth ministry doesn't take full credit for that, but we played a part in that. And often young people will say, yeah, you really did. And I think that's much slower. You can't see it in the moment. It's taken 10 years, but actually looking backwards, being like, yeah, this is good. This is a good thing. God has used us to do something good. And I'm glad that we did it.
Yeah. And I think as well, like in those moments and times where we might feel really discouraged about the youth or kids ministry that we're doing, like I think sometimes that's when we need to go back and revisit like the vision and the goals and the aims of why we're doing it and the things that we want to see happen. And sometimes we have to do that like as individuals, and sometimes we have to do that as a team, I think. And it can be difficult to like come up with goals and stuff, especially in the climate that we've been in, where you can't really plan very far ahead and we're not really sure whether we're going to be able to do anything, and we don't know if we're going to see the outcomes that we want to see. Sometimes we might think like, what's the point in even setting any goals, because we don't know if we're going to get anywhere. But I think that really helps with like measuring, not that we want to measure success necessarily, but it really helps with measuring that, like how well you're doing and whether you're on track with where you want your ministry to go. And I think the other thing is, the main thing is like we bring our best and it's God who does the rest. Like we don't have to do everything. We don't have to use every hour under the sun to be doing youth or kids ministry. I think at the end of the day, like ultimate success is measured in faithfulness. Like that's the important thing about ministry. Like it isn't numbers, it isn't the programs, it isn't how busy we are, but really it's, are we doing what God has asked us to do? Are we being obedient to that calling? And I think that's a far better measure of success than numbers is.
And it requires a deeper kind of relationship with God. You can do the whole programs and numbers stuff without really thinking about God much. Bring out some Bible verses every so often that you need to do, have a bit of prayer time. But actually, if you're trying to be faithful to where God's called you, I mean, that's confusing sometimes, but again, bigger picture, I think you can kind of think, okay, I know God's called me here. I'm doing the best that I can with the ministry that he's given me. And exactly, all of us, we want that good and faithful servant moment. That's a different measure of success. And that does not mean to say we don't set goals and all that kind of stuff, but I think ultimately we're trying to serve God and serve people and be faithful to God's calling.
Yeah, and I think it does require a bit more effort on our part, because like you say, like we need to be more in tune with what God has called us and asked us to do. And part of that requires us continually asking God, what do you want me to do today? Like, what do you want us to achieve this term? What are the activities and who are the people that are on his heart that we need to be reaching or doing more for, or like tailoring our programs and stuff around. And like at the end of the day, we are kind of going and moving into where God already is working. Like it's not like we're trying to bring God into places where he isn't already, because he's everywhere. And I think sometimes we forget that. And so it's about asking like, God, where are you already moving? And where do you want me to kind of tag along with what you're already doing? And sometimes that takes the pressure off us and puts it back on where it should be, really, with God who is in charge and in control of everything. We don't have that control. And actually that paves the way for more fruitful ministry sometimes, most of the time.
Yeah, and it brings about like a greater humility as well, because I think if we think it all depends on us and our brilliance and our genius, if it goes badly, we'll feel rubbish. If it goes well, we'll be like, oh, isn't God lucky to have me on his team? And actually, it's not really, it's not about us. We're not Jesus, we're not the Holy Spirit, we're not doing the stuff in people's lives. We're just trying to create the opportunity, and we're joining in. And I think that can be quite freeing, and it helps to detach from some, because it's easier to grumble. I think that's the other thing about ministry. Like, it's much easier to complain about how something's gone and moan about how it could be better than it is to say, targeted and specifically, these are the things that are good and going well in your ministry. And I think that rubs off on us. So if we've got that depth of kind of spiritual journeying with God, and also I think a good way to measure success is to also have faithful friends who are quite happy to call you out and know a bit what's going on. If you've got a good team, or like friends who understand ministry, to kind of go, just be reminded about what success really is. And I find that really helpful.
Yeah, and I think the thing with humility and the ego thing, like sometimes we think we're built, it's all about our ministry or our calling, this is our thing, or we have to take responsibility because we're the main paid youth worker, or we're the person in charge of the kids or youth work. But the hint is in that Bible verse, isn't it? The well done, good and faithful servant. Like, we're serving God in the ministry that we do. Like, it's his ministry. We're just a part of it. And so, like, actually, we need to sometimes recognize our place within that. Like, the responsibility isn't all on us. And it isn't for us to kind of to shape it how we want it. Sometimes what we want is what God wants. But sometimes, like, it can be those kind of like selfish or worldly measurements of success that we want, when actually what God's looking for is just obedience.
Yeah, and it's not always easy, but I think having that point of measurement, because we won't always see the fruit of what we do. Sometimes the stuff, biblically speaking, looking at Jesus's ministry, it didn't look all that successful right away. Obviously it was pretty successful, but looking from the outside, you may not have people may not have noticed it, and so being able to go to God and know that that's where our security comes from, and have I been faithful to what you've called me to do, and am I leading well? If you're in charge of the youth ministry or the children's ministry, am I leading in the direction you've called me to lead? Am I being that good servant? And it can toughen us up a bit, I think, if we're in that place, to hear bad feedback, to know where it's useful and to ignore it when it's useless, and to hear good feedback, and not have it all hang on how we're feeling at the time.
Totally. And I think obviously, like, Jesus had the critics as well, people saying like, who is he and what the heck is he doing? And I think, sometimes when we receive that negative feedback, whether it's like a parent questioning something that we're doing, or like young people who say they didn't enjoy it, or we just, we take the lack of involvement or engagement or attendance to mean that we're not doing a good job. Like, we have to kind of measure all those things, like not putting too much importance on that, because I think sometimes it's valid, like you said. Like, we need to weigh up that criticism and think, okay, could we have done better, or have we made mistakes here, or could someone have got injured? All those kind of things. But also, we need to measure that in a fair way that doesn't make us think, oh, we're doing a terrible job, or we must resign, or make a formal apology to everybody. Like, that all needs to be measured, I guess. Yeah, like you said, I think it's like, it can be really important as well, if you're part of a team, to kind of do that analysing together. So like if you've had bad feedback, like, and you're the one who's received it because you're the one in charge, like because you're the paid worker or because you're the main volunteer who runs the ministry, sometimes we think we have to take that negative feedback just on us as well, and that actually, you know, we don't want to burden anybody by sharing it, or like we feel like we're the one who has to analyze the work to find out whether it's successful or not, or maybe we're not even analyzing it and we just are making our own assumptions based on the numbers thing, or the fact that we're feeling a bit deflated about what we're doing. I think sometimes it can be really useful, like at the end of a session, we've just done a youth or a kids club, to sit as a team and do a brief debrief of that activity so that you're all contributing into that, so that everybody has more ownership of it as well. And I think when you do that, you're less likely to feel downhearted about how things have gone, because somebody else will see it from a different perspective and think, oh, actually, you know, this bit went really well, when you're focusing on something that didn't go well, or a talk that you thought you could have done better, or some young person's bad behaviour, or a negative comment that was shared, or, you know, sometimes we hone in on certain things when actually we can't see the bigger picture until we hear the other perspectives into the mix. And I think also as the leader of the activity, if we're the person in charge, like sometimes it's really helpful for us to facilitate that analysing or debrief at the end of activities, so that nobody else goes home thinking, what am I even doing here if we've done a really bad job? Because then we're taking care of the team properly, and we're like making sure that people feel valued, and it equals better volunteer retention, I think.
Yeah, and someone needs to hold the vision, either collectively across the team, but I think there needs to be a person, whether it's you or someone else, who constantly reminds us what we're doing and why we're doing it, because stuff changes. Like something that's really, really good for a time can move on, or something that doesn't look like it's bearing much fruit yet can still be the right thing, because you know what you're there for, and this is the best way that you as a team, human and flawed that you are, can go about trying to achieve that goal. And I think it is helpful, as well as the bigger picture stuff, to have some targeted goals that you can control. What, you know, if that's, we want to run a group in a school, so okay, our goal is to try and build connections with the school, and you can measure in 2 years' time. But some of them aren't helpful, and again, it's about wisdom and discernment. I remember someone trying to set a target once that there had to be a certain number of converts in a ministry per month or whatever, or per week. I don't know what it was, some silly thing. But you know, that's just a misunderstanding of how evangelism works, and that can lead to ineffective work, because you start to see people as numbers. Quick, get them in. Oh, can you pray the prayer quick now, because I've got to reach my quota for the month. So although sometimes those things can be helpful to keep us going and spur us on, I think we need to make sure we're doing it in a wise, thoughtful, and not pressured environment, not from a place of fear, but from a place of joy and looking to God, who is on our side. And
sometimes we're privileged enough to catch a glimpse of the fruit of the work that we do, but sometimes we don't see any. But I think the main thing is that we recognize our place as people who sow the seeds and trust that God will do the work, and we trust at the same time that there will be some fruit. We might not ever get to see it, but if we've been obedient to what God's asked us to do, then there will be fruit, whether we see it or not. And I think like that's the important thing, isn't it, at the end of the day?
So there we go.
There we go.
That's how we measure success.
That's how we measure success.
It'd be good to hear other people's thoughts on how they kind of keep themselves accountable and things. If you've got any ways that you find helpful to spur yourself on and to help yourself grow and things, love to hear them. As always, like, share, subscribe. That's how
you'll find us again. It's how it helps other people find us, all the algorithms. And yeah, we want to say thank you for listening. And we hope that however you sit on the success scale, whether you think you're doing a good job or not, that you will feel that you are a good and faithful servant in your ministry. And we're totally praying that for you.
Yeah. And actually, if you don't have people around you to encourage you and support you and keep you accountable, then get in touch with us. That's kind of what we're for. If you're feeling out on a limb on your own, we've talked about all this team stuff, and you're like, I don't have that. Reach out. Me and Becky are quite happy to talk that stuff through with you together, to pray with you, to go through, all right, well, where is your ministry successful, and be that helpful outside critical friend who points out what's good and maybe helps to grow. Not that we're the best for any, but it's just that we're outside and we want to support.
Yeah, we want to cheer you on and encourage you and support you if we can, and all of that's free through Youth Work Plus. So yeah, get in touch if you want some of that. Other than that, thanks for listening.
See you in episode 10.